If I'm not mistaken, and she'll give me signals from the back, I believe I'm talking about the preservation and propagation of the culture, correct? Cool, perfect, good. So I'm in the right place. Sometimes I'm not. It's like, damn it, not that lecture, the next one. And so that's my place. I'm Khari B, disco poet Khari B. I'm a poet. I can leave it at that. I'm a poet. I do stuff around poetry quite a bit, but I've been a part of this culture for the best part of my life, and it has definitely helped to shape me down to my name, disco poet Khari B, and how I approach the world. I want to first just give props to the organization taking on this undertaking of archiving and preserving this culture, which nobody has done thus far, or it has not done institutionally thus far, and it gets lost, and it's so crazy to me, and this will probably go into a part of my story, how when I went to college in the early 90s, in my head, house music was everywhere. Like, that's what we partied to, that's what we did, that's how we dressed, that's the people we were around. And then I went to an HBCU in the South, and they was like, yeah, we party at each other's houses. And I was like, no! The house music! No, I don't. And eventually I dropped out because there was no house music in the South at all. They had no context for what this thing was that had shaped me. So I was very, I have to say I was very uncomfortable with that, because this thing was my life, so to speak. A culture becomes a part of one's life. And stepping out and realizing that this was not life for everybody, for all, and I'll say all black people across the country, was a shock to me. And it was amazing to me. And as those years passed and it gained a bit more notoriety, so to speak, due to people like Frankie with the more commercial cuts, like the Whistle Song, and I'm trying to think of what, there were 3 house cuts in 4 years of school that they played, and everybody like, yeah, we're gonna play some house for you and your crew. And it was these 3 songs every freaking time. I can't see, I got it out of my brain because I was so sick of them. Like, I don't want to hear this no more ever again. But Whistle Song was one of those things. If you get the opportunity and you have a story about this culture, because I think we are all at a place where we're not just looking at it as a music, we're looking at it as a culture. If you have the time, please share your story, your unique perspective with the archivists here at DuSable, in conjunction with Honey Pot. Please share your story. No matter, if you think your part wasn't even important, if you think, I just went to the party a couple of times, that's important. That's so important. You don't understand the weight and the necessity of your own story. So please share your story, particularly if you were there. It's funny, I think I've had this conversation with Dwayne, being at like the Chosen Few picnic, and it's 40,000 people there, and all these people were there. But it wasn't no more than 1,000 of us at any given. So I don't know where these other 30,000 people come, 39,000 people came from. It was just, it was a small kind of things. So your story is very necessary. So please feel compelled to share your part of the story and where you inserted yourself into this culture. So what I'm going to talk about is it's going to be an emotional issue for people. Not that you're going to be in here crying, but some people are going to be like mad and cuss me out, and it happens. I'm going to talk about the failing of these early proponents of the culture to continue the culture on, to push the culture forward. Which is why when I got to the South, there was no house music there. This was the 90s. This culture had started arguably in 73, right? And these many years, 17 years later, it had not reached the southern part of the United States. But the crap rap they was playing down there and killing each other over spread like wildfire from coast to coast. And we had this music about love and passion and togetherness and all this goodness, and it was in this small little pocket, this little town that tries to pose as a big city called Chicago. This notes how, to me, this notes how we don't understand the importance of our story. How we don't value our, and black people have had this issue for a very long time. We invent stuff, we're so creative, we invent stuff, it's great, and then we invent something else, and we've never like really put the hand down on what we invented. And then other folks come behind us like, oh, that shit is the bomb. And, oh, can I curse? I'm sorry, I should ask these things. Are there any babies in the room? Nope, I didn't see any. Thank you. Other people come along and they like, this is great, and they market it and they make all the money on it, and then people who, the creators of this thing, whatever this thing is at the time, from the gas mask to the perm, well, not so much the perm, but from the gas mask to house music, get written out of the story eventually, because we're not telling our story. We don't understand the value as creative people. And we have to do way better than that. I think it's getting better, but let's just talk about house music. When I came, everybody who came into this culture that I know came in because they had older cousins. They had older friends on the block. They had older somebody that brought them into the music. And the wonderful thing about that is that made it kind of cross-generational. Like your parents were listening to disco music, but then these early proto-house engineers did the disco in a way that related to us even more so. Am I correct on that? Y'all can talk. I should not be the only one talking. Let me let you know. Like, this is halfway like a discussion or something. So, like, children dictate what's hot in the music scene now. And it doesn't, none of you, and I'm looking around, nobody's really under 25, if I'm not mistaken. All right, the one guy under 25. None of you gave Migos to your children. You understand what I'm saying? Like, but your parents gave Aretha Franklin to you. Our parents gave Gladys Knight to us. Our parents gave Ella Fitzgerald to us, and then they gave Sylvester to us, and then the us that was turned it into something else. You follow what I'm saying? So there was something. That's what makes it a cultural thing, is that it's moving through generations. This house music happened. We got it from some older folks, and then a certain generation decided, and this is a quote because I heard it 1,000 times, we don't want them kids in this party. Kids are the propagation of culture. Children are the propagation of culture. But for some reason, because it was so special to them, because it was so, it was that experience that they just held so dear to heart, the thing became, we don't want these children in the party. The ones that came after me were sneaking out the house, or came before me, were sneaking out the house at 13, 14, 15, 16. I've got their stories. They were sneaking out the house to get down to the warehouse, to get down to the music box, to get down to the power plant. Creeping, did not care about consequence. Your parents caught you at 4 o'clock in the morning, you was like, I'm gonna take this ass whooping. Cause I had a ball. I'm doing it again next weekend, right? But at a certain point, it was like, even though that they came in as young teens, as children, as we recognized them, they did not want to let that next generation take this thing on. I heard somebody in a conversation, somebody talked about how cable was not allowed in Chicago for a very long time, that we were some of the last people in the country to get cable television. We had Spectrum on TV. Y'all remember that? Nobody remembers it? I was about to say, I'll smack all y'all lying asses in here. You don't remember Spectrum on TV, right? So we had Spectrum on TV, but that was not cable television. With cable television came a lot of that, hip hop transmitted into all of these screens and people across the country. We didn't get it like that. If you went to the average hip hop party here in Chicago, it was 6 dudes, period. Respect to my brother, where is he? I know he's in here. It was like 6 hard legs, and that's not the party you wanted to be at. You wanted to be with 1,000 folks who was just getting it real hard and sweaty to the wee hours of the morning. So that was one factor in it all, that we were able to shape our scene. And then when that particular generation, in terms of music generations are like 5 years apart. They said we don't want no babies in the party, even though they came in as babies. And I remember, like, I can't wait till I'm 18. And then I got to be 18 and the parties was 21 and up. And then I was like, that's all right, I'll be 21 in a couple years. I got this coming. I turned 21 and the parties was 25 and up. Like, what the hell is going on? And like, that was a thing. Am I the only one who experienced this? Maybe I'm the only one this age. Like, and it was kept away. So then the babies coming up behind us with cable television and the radio, Clear Channel buying every radio station and deciding that the programming had to be the most negative, disgusting, disruptive, culture-crushing tool to make available to the people. They snatched them right up because we didn't. And that's what we're talking about today, the importance of keeping this thing going, because what did house music do for you as a 15-year-old person? How did it affect your life as an 18-year-old person? I heard the people on the panel speaking earlier about they were in these parties and no fights happened. I remember a few fights, but not a lot. I don't want to repaint the pyramids on this one. There was some fights. There was some GDs sneaking up in the parties, kicking it off. But it wasn't a common occurrence. We know music better than anybody else. Our appreciation of music, because house music, before it became house music, it was disco, it was funk, it was punk, it was whatever this particular DJ could get his hands on that beat like that. It was this melange of music that just sent us to the moon. So we got appreciation. Like, what was that he was playing? What was this Chinese, this Jamaican, this Latino cut that this DJ was playing in this other language, but it still had us going as much as Jamie Principle's whatever. So we had a greater appreciation for music, and I think a greater appreciation for music for people improves that person as a person. Music makes you better, or can, and the more music we learn, the more music we encounter and ingest, the wider we are able to see the world. And house music gave many of us, and I won't say all of us, some people didn't like it, but many of us, a wider appreciation for the world. The other part is how it was blowing up overseas. And all of these Europeans were able to take this music, put their stamp on it, and propagate that culture. What they made it their own, and propagate that culture into today. I remember reading a couple of years ago, there's was a group, they were retiring, they were in their 20s, I believe. The Mafia, don't y'all say 3-6 Mafia, don't say that. The Swedish House Mafia, thank you. And it was 3 European guys, and they were able to retire because they're doing these parties on a regular with 40,000 people overseas. Until, I dare say until, I don't remember a gathering of 40,000 of us here in Chicago until the Chosen Few picnic in the last few years. And I know some of the best. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I know some of the best DJs in the world. These people who I grew up with. And who were not working 40,000 person parties. They would have loved that. But that failure to pass that music down, to pass this culture down, the style of dress. I'm telling you, when I put on, this is my house outfit for the day. Like, I never left the culture, right? But I show up in Nashville, Tennessee looking like this, and I might as well have landed in a spaceship and stepped off as far as they was concerned. And they were like, we don't get it. What is this blouse and brooch and these stacked shoes and what is all of that? And I'm like, it's house, again, no context at all. The music I was looking for, the way that I dressed, the way that I talked, it all came from this culture, and I saw how it benefited me and my circle. And it, interesting thing, I'd never dated. I didn't date as a young man. This is bad and good, because then I got older and had to go on dates, and I didn't know what the hell to do. And I would tell people all the time that for me, the party gave me everything I wanted. So what were you, I'd go on a date, dinner, and a movie. Why? That's boring as hell. I'd go and it's 60, it's 1,000 of us in a room, and I'm dancing with 20 women a night, and we all go eat afterwards, and it's electric, and it's fiery, and it's all of these great things, and occasionally we break each other off, and it's great. It provided everything that I needed in the world, so I never went on a date. I literally did not date until maybe 5 years ago. Lost, completely lost. I was like, so how do you do this? I saw how it benefited my life, and I realized, I lamented how this thing had not been passed down. And I do this event production called the Debauchery Ball. The Debauchery Ball is open to everybody. I'm very proud to say that our demographic varies from 21 to 70. Literally, there's been somebody there 21, there's been somebody there 70 years old, and we get it. And what I say about the party is that it's the party I missed having. So I created it. And when we were looking for a spot a couple of years ago, it's in a secret spot every year, it's once a year. Looking for a spot, we were in a shared workspace, and there were these 2 young women there, both 21, 22. And they were like, oh my God, we heard y'all talking about house music. We love house music, but we don't know where to go. Nobody plays it within our circle. And we was like, excellent. We have something for you. Our babies are out there needing this thing that we call house culture. And if it is not passed down to this next generation, it's gonna fizzle out here. And it's something where they're going to rewrite the story. There was a news article, I saw a bunch of DJs and producers having a fit about maybe last year, and some major media source, I'm not saying them because I don't remember what it was. It was a European guy from, say it, him, yep. And it was like, he created house music, and everybody was like, hell no! And I was like, but it's y'all fault, because you didn't tell the story. If you had told the story, if we had stood on this thing from 73 up to now 2019, then there would be no confusion on who did this thing. What I appreciated about the European was that he didn't take credit. He was like, no, I didn't do this, but thanks, I'll take those accolades. I'll take those accolades. But when somebody starts rewriting your story, you have to step up and let that story be known. So again, I want to impress upon you the necessity for you to go tell your story. What was the party that you went to that changed your life, that blew your mind? What made you sneak out the house and take that ass whooping or punishment so many times? What was it that kept you in shape in your younger years, and then you realized once you stopped dancing, you was not the man or woman that you used to be? I remember that. I kept dancing, I swear to God. I just never left. As for all the hills and valleys that house went through, I never left, because it fed me so well. I didn't know what else to do. I don't want to say I didn't know what else to do. I did know what else to do, but it was, every time I go out to this day, it's always a new experience. I'm still finding new dance moves in this body. And I know when I hit a move that I ain't never done before in life. I'm like, my body tells me like, whoops, that was brand new. Hey, it's a whole, Monk, your body tells you that you ain't never done that before in all these years of dancing. So like, I come from a very large family. And when I say large family, I'm not talking about numbers of people. These are some big ass people. They're pretty large. They're heavyweight. And damn, it's on camera. They're gonna see that. This thing kept me slim because I kept dancing. There's nothing in the world like it to me, like being able to just get on the floor, and I will tell everybody I do not know how to dance. I have no idea, never take a dance class. If you give me 5 moves, I'm gonna mess up at least 3 of them in any given session. I just know how to listen to the music and do what it tells me to do. My body does. My brain has no idea. I just cut my brain off, listen to 7 ways to jack your body, and do the 7 ways in the moment that he's telling me to do those 7 ways. Our children are out here begging for culture. Our children are out here begging for something different. And we are not giving it to them. Or and now we're so far removed, we don't even know how to approach them with it, despite the fact that they out here. So I applaud people like my little sister Ray Chardonnay, who's a millennial who is beating house around, and they've created their spaces for them to do. We created our spaces. We had older people like Robert Williams, who literally created these spaces. Who started the reactor? Fred Riley. Forgive me, Fred, for forgetting. It's just in the moment. Fred Riley created a space. He was an older guy, but he created a space and put all these young people, Dwayne, in charge of this space that we could come and just let loose. There were drugs, there was alcohol, there was fornication, there was all the fun things in life. I didn't do any of that. I couldn't get laid to save my life. Didn't do drugs, didn't touch alcohol until all the way into my late 20s. It was the music that just fed me, that did enough. And if I wanted to do some drugs, they were there. If I wanted to have that experience with alcohol, it was there. I just wanted to dance, and that was my experience. And I appreciated everybody in any door that they came into. And I know that it saved my life. I didn't grow up in the suburbs. I didn't grow up in the real posh neighborhoods. My neighborhood wasn't bad. It was the buffer zone between Beverly and Roseland. We were the area, nobody even knows this area. I think people know it now, but it's called Washington Heights. Washington Heights was simply to keep Roseland from rolling into Beverly. That's it. That's it, and that's all. But I know that because of what it was, and credit due to my parents on how they reared us, I had no interest in gangs. I went to high school with all the gangs, all of them. They was stacking and everything all day, every day. But we was house, a bunch of us. We were house, and we didn't need that. Somebody else talked about the dance crews. I didn't even join the crew. Did I? No. But I remember the Gucci 2000s. Was it Gucci? Say what? Generation 2000, G2000, right. G2000 and Ecstasy and the Acid Heads, and I remember them. I love seeing them coming. I love when the soul circles opened up and cats started going at it. I love jumping in. I love diving over people and landing on my face just because. This was this was a thing. And I'm going to stretch and say that this hold that commercial radio has on our communities could not have happened if we had spread this thing out. And we would have a whole bunch more millionaires feeding into our black economies, because it started off as a black gay thing, went into just black people, period, thing. We would have a lot more millionaires feeding into the community. It was our thing. I mean, DJ International was, ripping off people and all of that. But there was a lot of self-made producers and musicians and things that took these disco and funk and soul sounds and created this unique thing for us. So. Yeah, questions, comments, concerns? Yes, ma'am.
No concerns. But at this point, I'd like for us to join in the conversation. So,
that's why I was opening it up.
Okay.
Time to talk.
All right.
Get on in it.
Come on. Okay, so thank you. We're going to still continue the conversation in light of discussing preservation and, where these stories are now, and also increasing the record, as we like to say as archivists. And so our blackivists are going to come up now and join Khari, and we'll all be in conversation about this very topic, increasing materials and, continuing to highlight our stories in house music. So if you guys come on up, and we can, it's gonna get real cozy up here. Wait a minute. Okay. Do we have enough chairs? Do we have, that's 4 or 5. Do we have enough?
Not sure. I think
Your musical chairs, like.
Yeah.
Yeah, take that.
Okay. We got to see. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. We still need one more. Okay. Oh, okay.
Okay, so we're gonna take, what? We can't even figure out how to get our bodies in chairs. But what we can talk to you about is archiving. And the importance of preservation. But, again, I can't thank you all enough for being here. This has really been a wonderful event and series of events, as we talk about the importance of increasing our presence. People, as I always like to say, not of the, I always say hegemony, everyone else is hegemony, so, potatoes, potatoes, but we know exactly who we're talking about when we recognize, the void and who isn't being fulfilled in that space. And this particular subject, thanks to Honey Pot Performance, is again, really being highlighted as we think about and talk about mapping these experiences, narratives, and coupled with material culture as we map this existence out. And today, everyone who has talked about house music, and who still lives it, you can just feel the spirituality of what that is. And I was probably right under Khari, because talking about you guys made the spaces. And then artificial, as I like to say, spaces were kind of made for us because we couldn't get into the parties that you all were already in. So like my experience was going to a house party at St. Dorothy's on, I think St. Dorothy's is around 79th and Vernon or something like that. So I mean, you have Catholic schools who are trying to create this experience because I was too young to get into the real, house parties. And then just thinking about, like Stacie wrote an article in which I'm not gonna take over, Stacie can talk about that, but we all have our experiences. So we're kind of in the middle. We're not, a part of that pioneering crew, and we're not a part of like the DJ Nate crew, the footworkers, we're, like I said, in the middle. And I remember going to Soul in the Hole and, Sada up north. And I remember being a weirdo, like eclectic growing up on the South Side and not really offering a lot of explanation for like what I looked like, but just,
That's how we met.
Yeah.
We saw each other getting on the train. And she was dressed the way she was dressed, I was dressed the way I was dressed, and we was like...
on the South Side, like, where you going,
Right, and we ended up, we were on our way to the same spot. We were 2 cars apart, but I knew she was house because of the way she appeared. And we just looking like, yeah, okay. And on the red line, which was the A-B back then or something.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
and we recognized each other, ended up in the same space.
Yeah.
That's culture.
And not to put your age out there, so I do my own, like 20 years later, because I was saying the other day, I was like, who would have thought that, we were the party kids, or, I mean, in my case, I guess, but, looking up to, again, my cousin Chelsea, who brought me in with Jamie Principal and Lil Lewis, and I was like, who is this? Who are these people? But, who would have thought that we would 20 years later, be sitting on a panel and like holding discussions and mapping these experiences out and, and like full on scholarship and, full on information professionals representing this material culture that, we've created as a people. Who would have thunk it, right? So, okay, I'm gonna put my mic down and,
You want to share your story first? Because what I wanted to talk about really, like the importance of the oral history is one aspect of collecting that history and ensuring that it's valued and lasts for the next generation to experience, understand as a part of like Black cultural production. But the actual physical materials that you might have in your home is another aspect of that preservation. So like as it relates to storage, Stephen and I were just having a conversation about the basement is the worst place to store your items.
Get it out the basement.
Immediately
get it out of your basement.
I have so many conversations with folks, and I'm sure everybody at this table has that conversation where they're like, I had more material, but I had a flood in my basement, right? And then all of that history gets destroyed, right? So ensuring that, if you have records, that they're in a dust-free environment, making sure they stay clean, because that's, once the grooves are messed up or dusty, or making sure it's in a dark room, right? So, because UV light destroys material like that.
Storing it upright, too.
Right.
It upright. Perpendicular to the shelf.
Yeah, if you have it in, if you have the original sleeve, you can put it in that, and that'll protect it, safeguard it to a certain extent. And then those materials, like records, should be stored at room temperature, so anywhere between like 68 to 70 degrees is where they should be stored at. So it shouldn't be, in the hottest part. Don't put it in the attic either,
Get it out of the attic
usually
today.
have a lot of windows,
Get it out of your attic. Actually, Tracy, I think, maybe that's even the more salient point. I mean, all of us could probably sit here and maybe tell you about some of those experiences we've had with house and the tributes to all the places that are no longer there. Buddha Lounge forever. But I mean, yeah, we are also here in this very professional capacity, because I think what is very challenging is as Khari said, yes, the culture is dying, and we do have this gap between the people who, you know, created house, grew up with house, and really experienced it as it was happening, to the young folks now. I don't know anyone in their 20s actually who knows any house music, and that's or not. I don't know anyone in their 20s who knows Chicago house music as it was. So our goal is to provide you all with some tips, some best practices about safeguarding those materials if you have them. And you know, certainly we can also answer questions if you all have them in the audience. But yeah, as Tracy said, I would iterate: get it out of your attic, get it out of your basements, keep it out of your windows. You got a photo you love, it's sitting directly with bright sunlight hitting it, get it off the wall, because that's going to fade your photographs. If you have pamphlets, portfolios, you know, paper-based material items, there are things called acid-free folders available. Paper is organic material. It will decompose. You notice if you have like news clippings and stuff like that, how they start turning yellow. You don't want those things decomposing in your home. If you have photographs, it's the same thing. Photographs are chemically reactive, especially if you're really old school. You have Polaroids and things like that. So acid-free sleeves. There are companies that make those, and we can share those names with you if you have them and you're interested. But I mean, that's actually what we're talking about here, because we can share the stories all day, and I think there's a lot of great respect there to our specific culture and traditions as African Americans who share our traditions orally. But in terms of the institutions we work at, there is no footprint of house within those archives. That documentation is not there. And so we're fortunate because we do happen to work in institutions where there's the possibility to share and preserve and create documentation around what exists, but without the material, everyone who did this will pass, and it will really just be a story. It'll be like a legend.
Can I ask a question of the audience? How many of you all have poll posters in your house? The poll poster, like the advertisement is a big poster they put on right on the pole. I know you got a joke. You got a poll poster, and that's how. I mean, that's how you found out what was going on. You drive down Stony Island, there's all the poll posters up, and it's like, Ronnie's at the such and such, and blah blah blah. So me and Joe were the only ones that did that. Okay, so how many of y'all got plugins? You got old plugins? Sweet. See?
And that's some of that material culture that we're talking about, because those things are what we call ephemeral materials. They weren't necessarily meant to last. You know, you put them up for a time, it gives you the information, and when you thought that the event was over, you might have trashed them or what have you. But I know some of you thankfully would keep those and would capture those, not only for your own personal reasons and for memory, but you know, that's that physical material that can say this thing happened, this thing exists, because especially for Black people, our memory is not always captured on something physical. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, we live in a society that says if it's not written, it didn't exist. And so it's important that if you do have those things, to keep them. But you are in yourself a walking archive. You have your memories, and so and only you and you alone know what your experience was within this context. But if you don't share it and don't get it either on paper or at least captured in a digital, you know, like a recording or something, no one will know, and that history will be lost. So we, you know, strongly encourage you to, you know, talk with us, or even just record yourself on your cell phone, or Lori, definitely talk to Lori, you know, because that's what Lori is doing, is capturing this experience. But you know, again, these things are certainly important, and it's important too, so that, because sometimes people don't know what they don't know, and a lot of the young generation have proximity to house music, but they just don't know it. You know, I'm was experiencing house music as more of a voyeur because I was a kid looking at other people engage with it, but also as I got older and going to these functions that churches were setting up. My experience was going to Screaming Wheels in Gary, and they had the dance music hall that was on the side of the roller rink, and I couldn't go in there because I wasn't old enough to go in there, but I would go and sneak and watch my sisters go and have fun and dance and all that stuff to house music. And that was my experience with it, seeing my family engage with it, and then going to cookouts and parties and things of that nature. And that in itself is a part of that, or at least gives some or knows how house music kind of transitioned and went outside of spaces, became on the airwaves and that sort of thing, and how it impacted the community. But I had younger cousins that were also experiencing it, but in a different way, and so they may not just know or understand what it was. So capturing it can help folks connect to that history in their own way as well. And it's important to continue those dialogues between generations, because I think that's a part of it too. When the grown folks say, hey, we don't want the kids in the party, that's a breakdown of the communication, but also not really understanding that at the time you're breaking down or disconnecting them from a history as well. And so this is a way to reconnect it.
To me, that's the first generation that actually did that in the line of black music. Like our parents played their music in the house.
Right.
Whatever their music was, whether they were in the gospel, jazz. My dad played avant-garde in the crib. I hated it. Couldn't stand it. I didn't know what that crap was until one day it all clicked in, and I was aware, and I was like, oh, this is psychedelic. This is why. But we got exposed. Like, I think our generation got exposed to the previous generation's music because it was played for us, and we were the first generation that this house culture generation was the first generation that did not really pump our music for our children or for those who came after us. And that's that dead spot. And that's the first generation to do it. Jazz lasted from the 20s on because it was always played everywhere.
Yeah.
I have a question for my fellow panelists. So let's say I have a photo album full of pictures, and I have glued the photographs to the actual photo album. How do I take care of that?
Well, you know the answer, but and we're also saying if you did that, oh God.
If you did that, we're not judging. But I mean, because yes, as Raquel said, there's just, you don't always know what you don't know. None of us knew how to do that either until we got to school for it. There are little things called a micro spatula. So if you have glued your photographs to a photo album, you can very, very carefully and gently extract that photograph. If you happen to have paper clips on anything, lose the paper clips, toss them immediately, especially if they're metal.
Why?
Paper clips if they're metal, so as we said, with paper, it's organic material, it decomposes. The metal on paper clips rust, so you can damage anything that metal paper clip is touching.
I was wondering though, how can we capture who we were and why we curated those things together in that way before we disassemble it and don't know, why did I make that book? Why did I assemble that? Who were those people and what was
That's a wonderful question. Tracy, would you like to address metadata?
I mean, since you just gonna put me on the spot. No, so what we do with that work is as when we deassemble things, we document it. So you should be taking pictures of stuff, writing down that narrative, what you remember about each photograph, who was there, where was it taken, why did you put this collage together like that, all of those events, the date, time. So it's the who, what, when, where, and why. All that information should be going along with that. So we get so many times where people bring in photographs, we have boxes of photographs where it's unidentified because we can't identify the person, we don't know the people, we don't know the place or anything. And so they just go into this like black hole of like photographs, right? And we lose that content, which is the most important part for us too. Like as it relates to, she said metadata, which is just information about a particular item or thing. So it's how we describe stuff, and that's usually the first thing that gets lost in archival material, but it's the most important thing. And then another thing, like I'll add too, so if you have some material, like the flyers or stuff that are already deteriorating, make a copy of it, because the information that's contained on that form, so if you have some paper that's already yellowing, that's the content is what's important, right? So it documents a people, time, place, the history of this music, and so that's what's important. And so we want to capture that, even if it's not on the original flyer. So.
I would also add with the flyer that may be breaking down and tearing or what have you, browning, do try to if you can, like a digital color scan, because sometimes that, especially if the flyer is on a piece of paper or a different color, if it's a certain color or a certain arrangement, that could signal to maybe who was probably the organizer or something like that, because people had their brands, So do try to capture it in a color scan, but definitely capture it. Do a digital scan.
Are there any questions? Yes.
See, back when they used to write on the back of the photograph before you tell. At one point, it used to print what date and time, and then people start inking on the back. Is that bad?
Oh yes. If it's done, it's done. Yeah. But don't do that to any of your photographs going forward. It's always best. You can create like a spreadsheet basically describing what's in the photograph, and then writing next to it, here's who's, writing all of that information that Tracy described next to it on a totally separate thing.
Yeah, because I think what people fail to realize is that like photographs and like a paper, it's a compound, it's a chemical compound, and so it breaks down, and everything that we create is not meant to last forever, so everything has a life expectancy, but what we try to do is create an optimal environment so that it can last as long as it should, right, over time.
Remember when you were saying about how to disassemble photographs that were on, not necessarily Google, the ones where you used to stick in the magnetic ones. If it's already on there, like if it was a paper or something, is there any way to preserve that? Like if it's a thin paper, for example, like a magazine, and it's already in there, is there a way to remove it?
Don't remove
it. No.
There's some things that we get in that we decide, so we make choices and decide it's too risky to take this off of there. So at the moment, if it's not as disruptive, then we just watch it over time, and that's what you should do. So like, don't try to take, in that case, don't try to take the advanced light, because it's gonna rip, right? So just let it be, and if it's not causing that much harm right now, but I would make a copy of it. But if it's not causing too much harm now, just leave it,
I think the guy in the hat had a question, sorry.
Hi, thank you all so much for everything that you do. So Khari was alluding to kind of these issues around generational breaks and so on, and what this means to the work moving forward. And I work in youth development myself. It's a nonprofit organization, but we do an after-school program at South Shore Prep. We were fortunate to bring a lot of our youth to the previous archiving day at the Arts Bank a couple months ago. But I'm just trying to think about, how can we make this work actionable and relevant for young people today, right in the here and now. So that's my job, and I'm actually leaving that job in a few weeks. But in my volunteer life, I'm a part of an effort that is trying to support some youth-led events and programming for Halloween here at Hyde Park, because in recent years, it's kind of been this issue and tension around, young people from all over the South Side coming to Hyde Park, downtown Hyde Park, Halloween night, and, all kinds of issues with public safety and inconsistent enforcement of, curfews and, you know, business interests and so on and so forth. And so, you know, I'm just trying to brainstorm and think out loud, like, you know, is there space? That's something that's real that we were trying to organize, like, with a specific deadline, you know, for Halloween 2019. And we're trying to put together a meaningful youth program for young people. But I'm just trying to think about, like, is there a space or a way to kind of do a youth program, you know, that responds to all this?
Okay.
Yeah.
This is the part that I don't like to be this person, but we are over just a few minutes for our next panel. So I would like to continue this conversation, maybe not directly since the next panel is happening, but we are around also. And then to your point about your question, we also recognize that the digital divide is real. So we have like a more like in the space a follow-up response to your question in terms of like ink on the back of the photograph as well. But we welcome you to please join us in the Hamilton Institute to continue this conversation, and then to also, after the next panel, come on over to the Hamilton Institute and look at the equipment that we use as well. And if you have more time, we can also give you a quick demonstration on how we use that equipment, because we're telling you what to do, how to do it. But I think that, you know, it would also help to contextualize for you by showing you. So we do welcome you to come into the space, but at this time we're going to go maybe like a 5-minute break, I believe, and then we're going to go into our third panel, which will happen right here in this room. So thank you all so much, and again, please, after the third panel, please join us over in the Hamilton Institute for further discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you.